So, you've identified all the costs associated with your business. Now you're ready to actually work out how much it costs you to produce your product or provide your service. The principles of how to do this are the same for products or services. However, the calculations are a little different. I'll talk you through each one, but remember you can also view the detail on screen as well. When you come to work out the figures for your business, I'd recommend having the information in front of you. Let's start with costing your product. That means all the raw materials, the packaging, and the labour costs. You should also add something as a contribution towards the overheads of the business. Here's how to calculate that overhead contribution. First, estimate how many products you'll sell in a year. In our example, we'll say 3,000 units. Now divide your total fixed costs, that's overheads plus drawings, by the number of units you expect to sell. This gives you a figure of how much fixed costs to allocate to each unit. Now add the direct cost to produce each item, and you have the total product cost per item. Here's the example. If your overheads are £6,000 and your drawings are £12,000, your total fixed costs are £18,000. Divide that by the number of items you expect to sell, 3,000 units, and you have a fixed cost of £6 per item. Now, if your direct cost to produce the item are £3, add that to the fixed cost of £6 and the product cost is £9. Maybe that's not as difficult as you thought. Just take it step by step. Now let's look at costing your service. This time we have to take into account your hourly rate for providing the service. Here's how to work that out. Estimate the number of weeks you expect to work during the year. Be realistic. There's holidays and bank holidays to think about. And there may be other occasions when you won't be trading. So let's say 46 weeks. Now, how many productive hours will you work each week? This is a time you can actually charge for. Remember, this doesn't include time for administration, marketing, bookkeeping, and planning. Time to actually run the business. So let's say your productive or chargeable hours are 24 hours per week. For the year, that means 46 weeks times 24 hours, making a total of 1,104 chargeable hours. As in the previous example, you need to have your total fixed costs. That's overheads plus drawings. In this example, I'll say the total is £21,600. So the calculation is fixed costs divided by the annual total of chargeable hours. In our example, that's 21,600 divided by 1,104, which equals a cost of £19.56 per hour. This is a basic cost per hour for providing your service. You may also need to add in costs for any materials you produce or use. For example, if you're a trainer, you may produce a workbook or training notes for your trainees. If you're a plumber, you may provide replacement items, such as a washer or pipes. Again, this calculation for service businesses is quite straightforward. You just have to take it step by step. Okay, over to you. Have a go at working out the cost for your product or for your service. You'll then be well on your way to being able to set your prices.